Laura Bennett opened the front door, her hand still clutching the small bag with the gifts she had carefully chosen for herself. The moment she stepped inside, a strange, sinking emptiness hit her like a cold gust of wind. The familiar warmth of her home seemed to vanish in an instant. On the kitchen table, a cake sat under a soft yellow glow from the candles she had lit herself. It smelled sweet, almost mocking in its perfection, while the silence around it felt like a physical weight pressing down on her shoulders. Maybe they're late, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. The thought barely had a chance to comfort her before a wave of disappointment and frustration washed over her. Her children, Emily, Josh, and Ryan, were nowhere to be seen. Not a single sound of laughter or familiar footsteps. Not a birthday message popping up on her phone. Nothing. Just the hollow ticking of the clock on the wall and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Laura set the bag down on the counter and pressed her palms to her face. She could feel the lines of exhaustion carved deep into her skin, traces of decades spent raising her kids, caring for their every need, sacrificing her own comfort. And yet, today, of all days, they had forgotten her. Her chest tightened with a bitter mix of anger and sadness. The realization hit her harder than she had imagined. Despite all she had done, the children she had raised had grown into strangers. She sank into the worn armchair by the window, staring at the autumn light fading into the gray sky outside. Memories flooded in, sharp and vivid. The smell of pancakes on Saturday mornings, the endless bedtime stories, scraped knees she had bandaged with trembling hands, the countless nights she had stayed awake worrying if they were safe. She remembered every tear wiped away, every argument mediated, every small victory celebrated with them. And now, it all seemed so fragile, so meaningless. Picking up her phone, she unlocked it with trembling fingers. No messages, no missed calls, only automated notifications from apps she didn't even remember installing. It was as if the world had moved on without her, and her children, the very center of her universe for 60 long years, had simply forgotten she existed. Her eyes blurred with tears she fought hard not to shed in front of the empty house. "Why?" she whispered into the silence. "Do they only need me when it's convenient?" She tried to push away the storm of emotions, the grief, the loneliness, the bitter sting of betrayal, but it was relentless. She remembered all the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the time she had put her children's happiness above her own. And now, as she sat alone in her own living room, the bitter taste of abandonment filled her mouth. The clock ticked on, relentless and indifferent, as Laura sat in the stillness. Each passing minute felt heavier, like another invisible hand pressing her down. She looked at the cake again. It was beautiful, perfectly decorated, with little white icing roses and a simple "Happy Birthday" Mom scrawled across the top. But without her children, it was nothing more than sugar and wax. She thought of calling them herself, but even that felt impossible. She wanted to scream at them, to demand that they come and remember the years she had spent loving them, yet the fear of being ignored held her frozen. Each passing second in the quiet house amplified the hollow ache in her chest. And then, a faint, almost imperceptible vibration interrupted her thoughts. Her phone buzzed. Her heart jumped. Maybe, just maybe, it was one of them. She snatched it up, hope flaring in her chest, only to find a message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Laura Bennett? I know we've never met, but I need to see you. It's important." Laura froze, her breath catching in her throat. Who could it be? Why would a stranger need to see her on her birthday? The sense of anticipation and dread coiled together in her stomach like a living thing. Little did she know, this unexpected message would mark the beginning of a day that would change everything. Laura sat frozen, staring at the message on her phone. Her fingers lingered on the screen, as if touching the words could somehow make sense of them. She felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. Who was this person, and why did they need her? But before she could even think of replying, her mind wandered, back to her children, back to the home that had once been full of life. Emily, Josh, Ryan. Names that used to echo through these walls like music. Names that once made her heart swell with pride and love. But now, they felt like ghosts, empty syllables carrying the weight of disappointment. She remembered Emily's first steps, the way her eyes lit up when she mastered tying her shoelaces. She remembered Josh screaming with excitement on his 10th birthday when he finally got the bicycle he had begged for all year. Ryan, the baby of the family, clinging to her legs every morning before school, insisting she walk him to the corner. Those moments were etched in her memory, vivid and unforgettable. And yet, here she was, alone. On the day that should have been a celebration, a reunion of love and family, she was left with silence. The cake remained untouched, the candles burning down slowly, mocking her with their quiet glow. The gifts she had bought for herself, practical, small things that spoke more of necessity than joy, felt meaningless without anyone to share them with. She tried calling each of them. Emily didn't answer. Josh's voicemail was full. Ryan's phone was off. With every unanswered call, her chest tightened a little more. Anger and sorrow mingled into a bitter cocktail that made her hands shake. She wanted to scream at them, to demand that they come and see her, to remind them that she had given everything for them. But instead, she swallowed the words, swallowed the tears, and let the silence press in on her. Laura had spent decades sacrificing herself, putting her children first in every decision. She had given up vacations, hobbies, even friendships, to make sure they had the life she dreamed for them. And now, all those years of care, all those sleepless nights and whispered prayers, seemed to have vanished into thin air. Her eyes fell again on the phone. The unknown message glowed on the screen, breaking the oppressive quiet. She couldn't stop thinking about it. Why today? She wondered. Why now? Every instinct in her screamed to ignore it, to protect herself from another disappointment. And yet, a tiny spark of curiosity pushed her to type a response. Who is this? Why are you contacting me? Almost immediately, the reply came. My name is Michael. I'm your son. Or I would be, if circumstances had been different. I need to meet you. Please. Laura's breath caught. Her son? Another son she had never known? Questions swirled in her mind faster than she could process. How? Why? Who was he? Her heart pounded with a mix of fear, disbelief, and, she hated to admit it, a fragile hope. Could this stranger, this Michael, be the answer to the emptiness that had haunted her for so long? She sank back into the armchair, trying to steady her racing thoughts. Images of her children flashed before her eyes. Not just their faces, but the years she had poured into them, the life she had built around their needs. And now, faced with the possibility of someone new, someone she could love, someone who might truly need her, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a flicker of possibility. The clock ticked mercilessly, marking each passing second of her solitude. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, scattering the last few leaves of autumn across the lawn. Laura shivered, not entirely from the cold, but from the tension in her chest, the anticipation of what might come. She had spent so long being taken for granted, overlooked, and yet here was a chance, a strange, improbable chance, to be seen, to matter, to be part of someone's life in a way she hadn't thought possible for decades. And then, almost instinctively, she grabbed her coat. She had no idea what awaited her, no idea who Michael truly was or why fate had led him to her doorstep on the one day she had felt most forgotten. But deep down, she knew this encounter might change everything. For better or worse, she had no choice but to see it through. Laura drove slowly down the quiet streets of her neighborhood, gripping the steering wheel as if it were the only thing holding her together. Her mind raced, tangled in questions about Michael, the stranger who claimed to be her son, and the painful absence of Emily, Josh, and Ryan. Every red light felt like a countdown, every passing house a reminder of the life that had once been filled with laughter and chaos. She replayed the message again in her mind. I'm your son. I need to meet you. Please. How could she even begin to understand it? The son of a friend? A secret she never knew? And why today, on her birthday, when the weight of loneliness pressed down on her more heavily than ever? She swallowed hard, trying to steady the storm of emotions threatening to spill over. When she finally pulled into the small cafe Michael had suggested, she spotted him immediately. He stood near the window, tall and lean, his posture hesitant, as if every step toward her was measured with care. His face was unfamiliar, yet there was something in his eyes that struck a chord deep in her chest, a sense of longing, of seeking something lost, something precious. Laura, he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Yes, she replied, her own voice barely above a whisper. Her heart pounded so hard she feared he could hear it. "Michael." He nodded, offering a tentative smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I know this is sudden. I don't even know how to explain it. I felt like I needed to find you. I needed to meet you. I've been searching for something I couldn't name for years." Laura felt tears sting her eyes. She wanted to say something, anything, but words failed her. Instead, she gestured toward the empty seat across from him. "Sit," she said. The cafe smelled of roasted coffee and pastries, but it didn't comfort her. She couldn't shake the sense that everything she had known about her life, about family, love, and loyalty, was about to shift. As they talked, Michael shared pieces of his life, fragmented memories of a childhood without a mother, a life of longing, and the circumstances that had kept him from her until now. With each story, Laura felt a mixture of sorrow and hope, her heart opening to the possibility that this stranger could become the family she had longed for all these years. But even as she listened, she couldn't ignore the gnawing ache left by Emily, Josh, and Ryan. The children she had raised, nurtured, and sacrificed everything for. Where were they? Why had they abandoned her on the one day she needed them most? The thought made her chest tighten, a dull, persistent pain that no conversation could erase. Her phone buzzed, startling her. A string of missed calls and messages from her children flashed across the screen. "Mom, we're so sorry. Traffic. Work. We'll be there soon." Laura's hands shook. Part of her wanted to call them back, to demand their attention and love. Another part of her, a deeper, wiser part, hesitated. She realized something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Maybe her heart no longer needed their apologies. Maybe it had room now for someone who truly sought her, who valued her presence without conditions. Michael reached across the table, placing his hand gently over hers. "I don't know what the future holds," he said softly, "but I know I want you in my life." Laura swallowed, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. She had spent decades giving, sacrificing, loving without reciprocation, and now, unexpectedly, a bridge had appeared, one that might lead her to real connection and joy. For the first time in years, she smiled, fragile but genuine. The emptiness that had haunted her for so long didn't vanish completely, but it was no longer suffocating. Perhaps this was the start of something new, something she had longed for but never dared to hope for. The clock on the cafe wall ticked steadily, a quiet witness to the beginning of a day that would redefine everything Laura had thought she knew about family, love, and herself. Outside, the wind stirred the autumn leaves, whispering promises of change, of hope, of an unexpected path forward. Laura drove home that afternoon with a strange mixture of emotions coursing through her. Michael's presence had stirred something she hadn't felt in years, a fragile hope, a sense that maybe life still had surprises worth embracing. And yet, the emptiness she had carried for decades remained, stubborn and heavy. She knew the arrival of her own children tonight could either shatter her fragile peace or test it in ways she wasn't prepared for. As she pulled into her driveway, the house seemed smaller somehow, colder. The golden autumn sunlight cast long shadows across the yard, and the fallen leaves swirled in the wind like tiny reminders of time slipping away. Laura hesitated on the doorstep, her fingers hovering over the key. She had lived in this house for decades, raised 3 children within these walls, and yet she felt like a stranger in her own home. Inside, she set her coat aside and looked around. The cake on the table, the presents she had bought, the decorations, all of it now felt bittersweet. Michael had promised to come over after a quick stop, and she hoped his presence could fill some of the void that her children's absence had left. She didn't know what the night would bring, but for the first time in years, she felt ready to embrace whatever came. Then the phone buzzed again. Another string of messages from Emily, Josh, and Ryan. "Mom, we're on our way. Traffic was terrible. Can't wait to see you." Laura read the texts and felt an almost physical pang in her chest. Anger, disappointment, and a strange reluctance swirled inside her. They were coming, but why had it taken hours of silence? Why had she sat alone with only a cake and a handful of gifts? Her mind raced back to the countless days she had spent putting their needs above her own. The soccer practices she had driven them to while ignoring her own appointments. The nights she stayed awake comforting them through nightmares. The hundreds of lunches, dinners, school projects, and scraped knees. She had given them everything, her energy, her time, her very soul. And yet, when the day finally arrived to celebrate her, they had abandoned her. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Laura's heart pounded as she opened the door, and there they were. Emily, impeccably dressed as always, her phone glued to her ear. Josh, carrying a briefcase and muttering about late meetings. Ryan, smiling awkwardly as though nothing had happened. They rushed inside, barely noticing the cake, barely acknowledging the quiet house that had waited for them. "Mom, happy birthday," Emily exclaimed, her tone bright but forced. Laura paused, taking in their hurried apologies and half-hearted smiles. "You're finally here," she said softly, almost to herself, her eyes scanning their faces for a flicker of genuine care. "I see you remembered." They looked confused, not expecting her response to carry the weight it did. "Of course, Mom. We got caught up. You know how it is." Laura shook her head slightly. "No, I don't. You've never seemed to notice how hard it was for me all these years." Her voice trembled, the calm she had tried to maintain cracking under the weight of decades of unspoken resentment. "I've given everything to you, and today, I sat alone." The room fell silent, the words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Their attempts at excuses faltered, leaving only awkward stares and uneasy shifting from foot to foot. For the first time, Laura saw them not as the children she had raised, but as strangers who had grown up without understanding the depth of her sacrifices. And then, Michael arrived. He entered the house quietly, his presence calm but deliberate. Laura took his hand, and together they stood at the center of the room. The sight of a young man who genuinely cared for her, who sought her out without expectation or obligation, struck her children like a revelation. Emily's eyes widened. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice tight. Josh and Ryan exchanged uncertain glances. Laura smiled, a small, powerful curve of her lips. "This is Michael. He's someone who matters to me." The room went silent again. Laura realized that for the first time, she was no longer waiting for them to validate her worth. She had found someone who genuinely saw her, someone who wanted to be part of her life. And in that quiet, tense space, Laura understood that her heart had room for real connection, even if it wasn't with the children who had once been the center of her world. For the first time, she felt a sense of freedom, a lightness that decades of devotion and neglect had never allowed. And as she looked at Emily, Josh, and Ryan, she knew one thing clearly. The past had shaped her, but it would no longer define her. Tonight, Laura would choose who belonged in her life, and it wouldn't be those who had taken her for granted. The evening shadows stretched across Laura's living room, mixing with the soft glow of the candles on the birthday cake. Michael stood beside her, calm and patient, his presence a quiet reassurance amid the tension. Her children hovered near the doorway, unsure how to enter a room that had suddenly shifted from familiar to foreign. "Mom, why didn't you tell us about him?" Emily finally asked, her voice sharp despite the polite veneer. "Why didn't we know?" Laura looked at her eldest, her eyes steady and unwavering. "Because you never asked, Emily. You never cared enough to look beyond your own lives. And now, when someone actually comes into my life who values me, you act surprised." Josh shifted, glancing at Ryan, who avoided her gaze entirely. "Mom, we didn't mean to hurt you. We were busy. Life." Josh's words faltered under Laura's quiet intensity. Laura took a deep breath. "Busy. Busy with your work, your schedules, your own priorities. You forgot me today, and you've forgotten the countless days, the nights, the sacrifices that made you who you are. And now you expect me to welcome you with open arms." Michael, sensing the storm of emotion, spoke gently. "Laura, they're your children. They grew up with you, and no matter what, that bond is still there. But you also have the right to protect your heart." Laura nodded slightly, appreciating his words. His calm, unwavering presence grounded her in a way she hadn't felt for decades. "I've protected my heart for them for so long, Michael," she said softly, "that I forgot it belongs to me too." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Emily's lips trembled as she tried to speak again. "Mom, we're sorry. Really, we didn't mean." Laura shook her head. "I don't need your apologies right now. I need to be seen. I need to know that my life matters to someone who actually wants to be here, not just out of obligation or guilt." Ryan finally spoke, his voice barely audible. Mom, it's not fair. We didn't realize how much we hurt you. Laura's eyes softened for a moment, but only slightly. Fair? Life is never fair, Ryan. And sometimes the people you love the most are the ones who fail you when you need them most. But tonight, I am learning that fairness isn't what defines happiness. Love is. And love, real love, sometimes comes from the most unexpected places. Her words hung in the room like a challenge, and for the first time, her children seemed to grasp the depth of their neglect. They were confronted with a reality they hadn't anticipated. The woman who had given them everything for decades was not theirs to claim blindly. She had her own life, her own choices, her own heart, and she was no longer willing to let it be overlooked. Michael stepped forward, offering his hand to Laura. "Let's go somewhere quiet," he said softly. "Somewhere we can start building what matters." Laura glanced at him, then at her children. The decision was clear. She squeezed Michael's hand gently, feeling a warmth and certainty she hadn't felt in years. "I think it's time," she said. "Time to focus on those who truly see me, those who genuinely care." Emily, Josh, and Ryan watched in stunned silence as Laura led Michael toward the door. The weight of their own neglect pressed down on them, but Laura didn't look back. She didn't need their understanding tonight. She had found someone who valued her presence, who sought her out not because of duty, but because of love. As they stepped into the crisp night air, the wind whispered through the trees like a promise. Laura felt the heavy burden of decades lift from her shoulders. She had been invisible to the people who should have cherished her. But she was no longer invisible. She was seen. She was wanted. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. The streetlights cast a gentle glow on Michael's face, and Laura smiled freely, without reservation. Tonight was not about disappointment, regret, or abandonment. Tonight was about the beginning of something entirely new, something real and enduring. The darkness of the past still lingered, but for the first time, Laura knew that light, true, unwavering light, was ahead of her. The next morning, Laura awoke with a strange mixture of peace and anticipation. Michael was already awake, quietly making coffee in the kitchen. The aroma filled the house, a comforting contrast to the tension of the previous night. Laura watched him move with a calm assurance, realizing that in a few short hours, her life had shifted in ways she hadn't dared imagine. But the tranquility was fragile. Her phone buzzed incessantly, each notification a reminder that her children had not yet reconciled with the reality of her newfound independence. Emily sent a string of apologetic texts, Josh called repeatedly, and Ryan left a voicemail filled with regret. Laura read them all carefully, but her heart remained unmoved. She knew their words were too little, too late. Later that morning, Emily appeared at her doorstep, unannounced, her face pale and anxious. "Mom, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. Laura opened the door fully, gesturing for her eldest daughter to come inside. "Talk," she said softly, her tone calm yet firm. "But remember, words are not enough anymore." Emily took a shaky breath. We didn't realize how much you've sacrificed, how much you've done for us, and we never truly appreciated it." I'm sorry, Mom." Laura nodded slowly, her eyes steady. "I hear your words, Emily. But I also see the years of neglect, the days I spent alone, the birthdays that passed in silence. Apologies do not erase that. Do you understand?" Emily's lips quivered, tears forming in her eyes. "Yes, I do. And I hate myself for it. I want to make it right. Please." Laura looked away briefly, gathering her thoughts. She realized that forgiveness wasn't just for them. It was for herself. "I want you to understand something important," she said. "I am learning that my happiness cannot depend on whether you are present or absent, whether you appreciate me or forget me. I have found someone who values me, who sees me for who I am. That is where my heart is now." Emily's eyes widened, and she looked toward the living room, where Michael was quietly sipping his coffee. Laura continued, her voice gaining strength. "Michael has been kind, patient, and genuine. He sought me out because he wanted me in his life, not because he felt he had to. That is what real connection feels like. That is the love I deserve." Josh and Ryan appeared shortly after, hesitating at the doorway. The atmosphere in the house shifted immediately. No excuses could mask the realization that Laura's life was moving in a direction they could not control. They exchanged uneasy glances, suddenly aware that the woman they had taken for granted had claimed her own space, her own happiness. Michael stepped forward, his calm presence reinforcing Laura's words. Laura has been alone for too long, not by choice, but because others failed to see her. She has a right to be happy, to choose who she allows into her life. Laura felt a swell of gratitude toward him. She realized that for decades, she had measured her worth by the love and recognition of her children. But now, she understood that her value was intrinsic, and her happiness depended on those who truly cherished her. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Her children looked at her with a mixture of remorse and awe. Laura finally spoke, her voice resolute. "I forgive you for the past, but I will not let it define the rest of my life. Tonight, I will celebrate with those who genuinely care for me. If you choose to be part of my life, you must understand that love is earned, not demanded." The tension in the room remained, but Laura felt lighter. She knew that her life had taken a turn, one that could not be reversed by guilt or apologies. She had discovered the true measure of love and family. It was not blood alone, but presence, care, and devotion. As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Laura and Michael stepped onto the porch. She felt the crisp autumn air fill her lungs, carrying away years of unspoken pain. Behind her, her children watched, realizing that the woman they had once controlled with expectation had grown into someone unshakable, someone who had reclaimed her own destiny. Laura smiled, a mixture of serenity and determination. The path ahead was clear. She would choose love, authenticity, and connection, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly free. The living room was quiet, yet charged with tension. Laura stood near the window, watching the last of the autumn light filter through the blinds, painting stripes of gold and shadow across the floor. Michael was beside her, a calm anchor in the storm of emotions that lingered. Across the room, Emily, Josh, and Ryan hovered uncertainly, their faces a mixture of guilt, curiosity, and something else, the dawning realization that they had lost control over the woman they had taken for granted for so long. Laura turned to face them, her posture straight, her eyes steady. "Do you see now?" she asked softly, but with an edge of authority. "Do you understand what it feels like to be invisible to the people who should have loved you most?" Emily swallowed hard. "Yes, Mom. I think I do now." Her voice trembled, betraying the mixture of shame and sorrow she could not fully mask. Josh looked down at his shoes, his jaw tight. We didn't realize. We didn't mean to." Laura held up a hand. "It's not about what you meant. It's about what you did or didn't do. You've had years to show me that I mattered to you. And yet, today, I sat alone, waiting for you to remember my birthday. Not a call, not a message, not even a thought that I might want to be celebrated." Ryan finally spoke, his voice low, almost broken. "Mom, we failed you. We didn't see you. We took you for granted." Laura's chest tightened, and for a moment, a flash of old hurt crossed her face. But then she felt Michael's hand on hers, grounding her. She drew a slow breath and let the pain soften into something else, clarity. "You're right," she said. "You failed me. But this is your opportunity to see me now, not as your mother who exists for your convenience, but as a woman who deserves love and respect. And that includes my right to choose who is truly part of my life." Her children exchanged uneasy glances. The room felt heavier, charged with the weight of unspoken truths. Laura walked over to the birthday cake, gently picking it up and carrying it toward Michael. She placed it on the small dining table, their eyes following her every movement. "This cake," she said, voice steady, "is not for you. It's for me. I will celebrate today with those who see me, who value me, who want to be here for me, not because they have to, but because they care." Michael smiled at her, a quiet, reassuring smile that filled the room with warmth. "She's right," he said. "Laura has given decades of her life to others. Tonight, it's about her. If anyone truly loves her, they will respect that." A long silence followed. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line, tears welling in her eyes. Josh's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his usual confidence shaken. Ryan's shoulders slumped, his gaze finally meeting Laura's, filled with regret and recognition. Laura took a step back, her heart pounding, her emotions raw but clear. "I forgive you," she said quietly. "But forgiveness does not mean you can dictate my happiness. I am free to choose my life, and tonight I do. I will not wait for recognition from those who have already shown me what they cannot give. I have someone who sees me, truly sees me, and that is enough." At that moment, the tension broke like a snapped cord. Her children looked at her, fully realizing the power they had never respected, the power of a mother to live for herself, to claim her own joy, and to surround herself with love that is genuine. Michael reached for her hand again, and Laura felt a rush of certainty, a clarity that had eluded her for decades. "Shall we?" he asked softly, nodding toward the door, toward the life waiting outside these walls. Laura squeezed his hand, smiling. "Yes, let's go." As they stepped outside, the crisp evening air embraced them. The golden leaves swirled around their feet, as if the universe itself celebrated this moment. Laura breathed deeply, feeling the weight of years lift from her shoulders. Behind her, Emily, Josh, and Ryan watched silently, finally understanding the cost of neglect, the value of presence, and the undeniable truth. Laura Bennett had claimed her life, her happiness, and her heart. And in that instant, everything changed. The past still lingered, but it no longer controlled her. Tonight was not about disappointment or regrets. It was about the dawn of something new, something extraordinary, something real. The night had settled over the neighborhood, a quiet blanket of darkness illuminated only by the soft glow of streetlights and the occasional flicker from a passing car. Laura stood on the porch, Michael by her side, watching the golden leaves dance in the cool autumn breeze. For the first time in decades, her heart felt light, unburdened, alive with possibility. Behind her, inside the house, her children lingered in silence. Emily, Josh, and Ryan exchanged glances, their faces etched with a mix of regret and helplessness. They had come, yes, but too late to claim the joy that now belonged solely to their mother. For the first time, they understood that love was not an automatic right. It was earned through presence, care, and genuine connection. Laura turned to Michael, her eyes shimmering with a quiet strength. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," she said softly. "I never imagined someone would see me, really see me, after all these years." Michael smiled, his hand gently squeezing hers. "You deserve it, Laura. You've given so much, and now it's time for you to receive. To be happy, to be cherished." A car pulled into the driveway, and Laura's children stepped outside to say goodbye. They looked at her, unsure whether to speak, to apologize, or to demand a place in the new life she had chosen. Emily's voice trembled as she finally whispered, "Mom, we understand. We're sorry. Truly." Laura's lips curved into a gentle, yet unwavering smile. "I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean you get to decide my happiness anymore. Tonight, I live for myself. I choose those who truly value me." She turned back toward Michael, and together, they walked down the steps, leaving the house behind, a house that had been filled with memories, love, and pain. The door closed softly behind them, a symbolic end to a chapter of life built on sacrifice and unreciprocated devotion. Outside, the crisp night air wrapped around them like a promise. Michael took her hand, and Laura felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the weather. The leaves rustled, golden and amber, swirling in celebration of the life she had reclaimed. She looked up at the stars, blinking away tears of relief, of joy, of liberation. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice full of anticipation. Michael smiled. "Anywhere, everywhere, wherever you want. Tonight, we start fresh." Laura laughed, a sound she hadn't heard in years, clear and unrestrained. The city lights flickered around them as they stepped into the unknown, hand in hand, free from the weight of neglect, expectation, and disappointment. For the first time, she felt truly alive. Back at the house, Emily, Josh, and Ryan watched the figures disappear into the distance. They stood silently, knowing that the woman who had raised them, who had loved them unconditionally, had finally chosen herself, and nothing would ever take that away from her. In that moment, Laura Bennett became more than a mother who had sacrificed everything for her children. She became a woman who had reclaimed her life, her joy, and her heart. And the night, quiet yet full of possibility, whispered that this was only the beginning of a story that would belong entirely to her. For the first time in 60 years, Laura walked forward not as someone defined by others' expectations, but as the author of her own happiness. And nothing, no past neglect, no ungrateful children, no lost years, could take that away.